Hello and welcome to the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast. The intention of this podcast is to open your mind, get curious about yourself and connect to the power you hold within. I am your host, Karen Maloney, an inside-out coach, helping you to believe in yourself and manifest your desires. Check out the podcast, available on all platforms, and go to my website, www.karenmaloney.com for all info. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. It's me, Karen Maloney, and this is another episode in the Cancer series. And this week as well, my guest is Julie Ryan, who we've also had of connecting with before and having as a guest on the podcast. And Julie is a psychic and medical intuitive who can sense what medical conditions and illnesses a person has and facilitate energetic healings. Next, describes a series of events that involves angels, multitudes of deceased family and friends, the spirits of deceased pets, and countless serendipitous and miraculous moments. Julie's Angel Messages books are picture books that have angels answering kids' tough questions. Each week, Julie scans callers on her Ask Julie Ryan nationally syndicated radio show and international podcast. She is a businesswoman, an inventor, author, radio show host, podcaster, and a serial entrepreneur. Her surgical device inventions are sold globally, and she has founded 9 companies in 5 different industries. And her psychic and medical intuitive skills are learned. And I love connecting with Julie, and she talks about cancer and how she works with people with cancer and how she sees cancer in the body and what kind of energetic healings she sees taking place in the body, in different organs, in the DNA. And she describes it, the analogies and the imagery she uses is very clear that we can all get an idea of what's going on, whether we have heard of the likes of this or not before. She also talks about the energy field membrane and how there is always 100% of the time an emotional aspect to cancer as well. And she explains more how an event can affect the emotional body and then in turn the energetic body and then in turn the physical body. She also talks about how our thoughts create our reality and how nobody can control our thoughts. At the end as well, she also shares 2 very practical pieces of advice and different numbers that you can Google and research when it comes to certain medicines or certain medical procedures, as well as sharing a 2-minute rule to help move through fear. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you want to connect with Julie, learn more about her work or call into her show that she does every Thursday as well, you can go to her website, which is www.askjulieryan.com, and all information will be there. But as always, I will have links from the show notes on my website, karenmaloney.com, and click the podcast section. And Julie has also kindly offered anyone who would like to get a copy of her book, Angelic Attendants, to go to her website, askjulieryan.com, and click the Ask Julie section and complete it and say you heard her on the show, and they will send you a free audio and ebook version of that book. But again, I will have all the links on my website, karenmaloney.com. And without anything further, I will let you enjoy this episode. Welcome, Julie. I am so excited to have you back and to connect again. And I just adore connecting. And I'm so delighted that you're sharing as well your wisdom, your experience, your knowledge in this cancer series as well. So thank you so much, first of all.
Oh, anything you want, as long as it's legal or ethical, legal and ethical. Let me put it that way. You got it, girl. The answer when I hear from you is always yes, even before I know what the question is.
Oh, so sweet. And yeah, I just appreciate you so much. And yeah, like we're just chatting there before we started recording, just my intention with these conversations on cancer as well is maybe just even expand on different options, different ideas of what might be going on in the body, and also to help maybe take some of the fear out of that word, because it's a loaded word. So yeah, so first of all, you joined me before, and that's a wonderful episode, and I can link it again in the show notes. But just first of all, give us a quick introduction to yourself as well, first of all.
I'm a businesswoman and an inventor who learned how to do woo-woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. How about that?
Love it. You got that right, nailed right there and
So
then. That's
I
exactly it.
I am a medical intuitive and psychic medium. I learned how to do all of this stuff, Karen, and I'm not a psychic that had dead people chasing her since childhood, or if I did, I didn't know it, let alone what I would have done with that information.
Yeah.
And what I do most of the time is I do medical scans and energetic healings. And I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world. So my frame of reference is maybe a little bit more towards being a human MRI, if you will. I'll watch energy go to a kidney and I'll see a diseased kidney, and then I'll watch that kidney get healed and things like that. And so that's really the majority of the work I do, primarily because that's what people ask me to do. They need help. They've been to see many doctors and other medical providers, and they've gotten different treatment plans, and different modalities have been tried, and the symptoms are still there. So they're sometimes out of desperation, calling me and saying, all right, can you help with this? And so we reverse engineer their symptoms and hopefully find the root cause, and then come up with not only energetic healings, but also different steps they can take on the human side of the equation to help them heal. And by connecting with spirit, that's where my buffet of psychicness comes in. So we can talk to your dead grandma. I can scan you medically. We can scan your pet. We can talk to your pet. We can talk to any spirit that's attached to a body or not. Doesn't matter. I can tell how close to death somebody is. We can do past life stuff. We can talk to spirit guides, angels. It's just whatever you want. Once we connect with spirit, it's open season. We can do whatever you need.
It's all possible. Yes, I love it. And, I definitely recommend people go back and listen to learn more exactly how you do that and your work. And I'll just share quickly as well, because it just flashed back into my head as you were sharing that you did a healing scan for our cat Poppy, or my mother's cat Poppy, back in Ireland. Oh, it must be 2 years ago now, where she was literally on death's door. She was attacked really bad by a greyhound, and it wasn't healing. And she was back to the vet and back to the vet. And Mom was very upset one Sunday evening, ringing me and my brother and saying, I think I have to go back again in the morning, and this is it. Like, there's nothing they can do. And we were like, hold on, Mom. No, we'll all say our prayers and visualize her healthy. And I was like, I'm contacting Julie Ryan. And you did. And we called into your show. I called in on behalf of Mom into the show, and you did a scan, and you saw an inside out kind of stem cell healing happening. And Poppy is still bright and breezy, and Mom's bamboozled some days because she's like, it's like nothing ever happened to her. She doesn't seem to have any trauma after it or fear, and she's jumping around the place. So thank you for that as well.
You are most welcome. At your service, my dear, anytime.
Yeah, love it. And I've called in loads of times as well and had session with you. But aside all that, like that, people can learn more when listening back, and you'll share at the end where people can connect with you. But again, for this series as well, what have you come to learn is your understanding of cancer from the people that you've worked with as well? What's your understanding of kind of what's happening?
Everything can be healed. The body has a tremendous capacity to heal. And miraculous remissions, if you want to call them, or miraculous healings occur every day with people all around the world, from every walk of life, every socioeconomic bracket, every education level. It doesn't matter. And I think the most important thing too, Karen, is to understand that we all heal ourselves. Nobody else heals us. No doctor, no nurse, no medical practitioner, no healer for that matter. We facilitate the person healing themselves. And I think a great example of that is if you think about when somebody has surgery, at the end of the procedure, the doctor's going to use sutures and staples to close the incision. Well, the doctor doesn't make the patient's skin grow back. The patient makes their own skin grow back. And I think that's a great example of how this works. The other thing is, in some instances, in a lot of instances, the healing can be death. The healing is something that the spirit decides. We all decide how a healing is integrated, when, what is involved, so that our spirit can have the experience and the exploration of what it came in to explore and experience. And we have lots of scripts and subscripts of things we come in to explore in each lifetime. So I think it's important to make that comment as well. When people say, well, he put up a really good fight and he didn't make it. Well, his spirit decided it was ready to go to heaven. It just didn't want to, it had done everything it wanted to experience.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful reminder as well, and truth that there is this spirit aspect of us that is more true than the physical, that is here to have these experiences as well. And yes, the self-healing capabilities as well of the body when it is supported. And, just touching back on something you said earlier, how people often come to you out of desperation. And that's often the case, that we may turn to something as a last resort because we feel, well, I've tried everything else and nothing has worked, and this is all maybe a load of woo-woo and it probably won't work either, but I've no other options. How can we begin to even change the conversation that people are more open-minded? And I think especially even with cancer, because chemo, radiation, surgery, they're your options. It's such a kind of narrative that we all know, that often to look outside of that sometimes can seem really scary. Like, if I don't do this, these are my best options. Well, nothing else is going to work either. But yeah, I suppose, why do you think, people do come to you or some other modalities as a last resort?
Well, because somebody's told them about me, or they've read one of my books, or they've just done an internet search on medical intuitive or energy healing or something like that. And that's how we advance as a human race. It used to be, well, man can't fly. And then the Wright brothers figured out we could fly. And then 4 decades later, we landed on the moon. So that's how advances come about, is somebody will hear about something and then they'll try something and then they'll tell somebody else. What I find and what I tell my clients, Karen, is the work that I do is complementary to Eastern and Western medicine as we know it. It doesn't have to be an either or.
Yeah.
It can be in addition to. It's just another form of healing that's part of the healing equation. And the other thing that I always say is, pay attention to how something feels when you hear it or you read it. If you hear a doctor say, okay, you have whatever kind of cancer, and we need to do chemo, and we're going to do radiation, and we're going to start you in 3 days, and blah, 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 blah. Well, that cancer didn't form in 3 days. You can, of course, you're in fear. And of course, we're in a fight or flight situation when those words are spoken. And when we're in fight or flight, we lose clarity because all the blood rushes from our brain into our heart and our extremities. And all we want to do is run. So if we can take a breath and say, okay, well, you've given me a lot to think about, and let me go check this out. And I want to ponder it some. Then you can take a step back and say, okay, here's what the situation is. Here's one option. What are the other options? What are options that perhaps are complementary that I can do in conjunction with this? And if something doesn't feel right to you or doesn't feel good, don't make a decision on it until it does, because that's your intuition saying, yeah, there's some red flags here. Something's not right.
Yeah. And that's the beauty as well, that we do all have this intuition to find ways that work for us. And like you say, it doesn't have to be a total one way or no way. We can pick and choose and, like that, do and find things that make us feel good. And I think that's really important as well. And I love what you said about the fear, and we just think, this might be the only option. And then in your work as well, when you're working with someone with cancer, Does it show up obviously, like straight away when you're doing your like human MRI that it's cancer, or how does it appear in the body?
Cancer looks to me like hot asphalt. It's
Mm.
sticky, it's dark. I see it in the hologram of the person with whom I'm working, whether they're calling into my show. I have a call-in show called Ask Julie Ryan that I do every week. And people call in from all over the world and they ask Julie Ryan, they ask me questions. And a lot of them have to do with health. And there was a woman recently, Karen, who came on and she said, I had a mammogram and they want me to come in for another one and then a possible biopsy. Can you scan me and see what's going on? And I did. And I said, I think that's a good idea. I think you should, that would be in your best interest to go get a scan. And I had her on the show, so I wasn't going to go into great detail, but I
Yeah.
knew that I was going to see her as a private client. We had a call scheduled in the
Mm.
next week or two. And then I could really talk openly with
Yeah.
her about it. But what I did during the show, and then again subsequently when I had her all to myself for an hour in a private consult, was I did a healing on her. And this is very common with cancer healings is spirit working through me and with me
Mm.
to facilitate healing, will encapsulate the whatever the cancer is, if it's encapsulatable, if there's a tumor somewhere, and remove it. I use stem cell energy to fill in the blanks. There was a woman this morning that had bone cancer. So I watched her skeleton leave her body. I watched it get dipped into a big vat of stem cell energy.
Mm.
I watched it get reinserted into her body. I watched a bunch of vortices spinning around her, above her, beneath her, on either side of her, front and behind her, all spinning concurrently. And that regenerates new calcium and new bone in her bones where it looked like part of the bone had been eaten away to me. I see these wild visuals in my head. And they're to give us a frame of reference for this woo-woo stuff that's happening. So I'll do that. I'll do DNA healings all the time when I'm working with
Mm.
somebody with cancer. I watch the strands of DNA get resequenced back to a normal recipe because
Mm.
they've mutated and the cells are being directed to behave in a way that's not optimal for
Mm.
health. And so I watch the DNA as the recipe that tells the cells how to behave, and it's comprised of 4 nucleic acids, and they're represented by 4 letters, A, T, C, G. A strand of DNA looks like a piece of paper you'd see inside a fortune cookie with the fortune written on it,
Mm.
and it has all these letters on it. And I watch the
Oh,
letters get
wow.
resequenced in warp speed. That's an example of one of the visuals that I get just to give us a frame of reference. I'm watching the DNA get resequenced back to a normal recipe.
Mm.
It comes out of an X chromosome. Girls have 2 X's, boys have an X and a Y. So I always see an X chromosome. When the strand has been reconfigured, it snaps back in. Normally with cancer, I will see 7 strands come out that will get resequenced. I had a gal call into my show last night, Karen, with whom I had worked a few months ago, and her cancer markers, the numbers had gone up a little bit when she went to the doctor earlier this week.
Mm.
So we just did a tune up because those cells can be crafty and they'll mutate. They'll keep mutating to try to stay alive. That's why when people are getting chemo, sometimes they'll say, okay, we got to switch your chemo because the cancer's not responding to it
Mm.
anymore. Well, because the cancer's mutated. So we can stay 3 steps ahead of them and just redo the DNA, and it mutates, fine. We just restore it back to a normal recipe. It wants to mutate again, fine. We restore it back to a normal recipe. And it takes just a few seconds when we're doing a tune-up. I also do a lot of lymph fluid draining and healing. And I'll watch the lymph fluid in the body go into this, looks like a pneumatic tube like you have at the drive-through at the bank that you put a container in and it
Oh,
sucks it
yeah.
up into the building, that kind of a thing. And so it's a vertical oval and it's in front of the person. It's in their body, but on the front of their body. And so all the lymph fluid goes in there and it spins really fast. Lymph fluid looks amber colored to me. It's kind of globby. Do you remember the lava lamps that they used to
Yeah.
have, and that fluid inside was kind of
Yeah.
globby and goopy.
Yeah.
That's what this looks like. And then there's a hole that opens at the bottom of each foot. And so basically what we're doing is a reverse osmosis purification of the lymph fluid. And I'll watch the impurities and the cancer cells go out through the bottom of the feet. And then I'll go into all the lymph nodes, and lymph nodes that have corralled cancer cells, which is what they're supposed to do. Lymph nodes look to me like little D3 capsules, again, an amber color, and they look dark. Sometimes they can have a black spot in them. Sometimes the whole thing can be dark. So I watched this thing. I think I must have seen this in a Spider-Man movie or something, but I watched this thing that I call a magnetron, and it goes around the person's body and it pulls out all the lymph nodes that have encapsulated the cancer cells, gets them out of the body, and then I use stem cell energy to regenerate the lymph nodes. It's really phenomenal, the things that I get to see in my mind's eye. And I always laugh. I say, I promise, I don't even drink alcohol or take drugs. I've never taken LSD. I know it sounds like an acid trip, but it's just drugs. Just learn woo-woo. You'll see all kinds of amazing things.
Well, like you say, you learned it. You didn't,
I learned it. And
grow up this way per se.
I teach
Yeah, and you
people
teach
around the
people.
world. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so amazing. And I always love connecting with you and talking to you because you're so brilliant as well at the analogies and the visuals and everything that you use to help people. And obviously that, helps us all to get it a little bit more. And because what you've spoken about there and how, it's all done pretty quickly in that, but you mentioned earlier as well about our spirit integrating it. So is that ultimately always still our spirit's choice? Can
Yes.
that miracle healing happen in one session like that with you? Or does there need to be more, or can it be totally rejected?
Great question. The healing happens on the energetic level, so it's already happened. It'll integrate into a person's body if their spirit chooses to integrate it. And if it chooses to integrate it, it can be absorbed and integrated instantly. It can take days, weeks, months. It may need some kind of complementary care. There's a whole plethora of other things that somebody can do, both traditional Western medicine, Eastern medicine, whatever. And so it's always our spirit's prerogative to utilize a healing in a way that's going to best facilitate whatever it is our spirit's exploring in this lifetime. And we don't know what that is. We forget when we incarnate, because otherwise it wouldn't be much of an adventure if we knew, okay, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And furthermore, too, Karen, we live countless lifetimes, and I'll see a semblance of a script that will repeat throughout multiple lifetimes so that we can look at something from a different perspective. So perhaps somebody that has cancer in this lifetime was the mother of, the father of, the sister of, the friend of, the colleague of, the spouse of, the child of somebody that had a potentially terminal illness in a past life. Or perhaps they were the caregivers or the medical providers. So we don't know what that spirit's coming in to explore and experience. And each time we do, our spirit expands because we create out of the contrast. When we know what we don't want, it helps us create what we do want. And even people that suffer so horribly in their disease or illness, whether it be cancer or something else, their decision to continue with that or to try something else, perhaps call me, well, that's a spiritual path, that there's a trajectory there that their spirit is taking that they maybe wouldn't have ever considered had they not been in this situation. And who knows where that's going to lead. And I think at the end of the day, too, it's important to remember that nobody can control us because nobody can control our thoughts. Likewise, we can't control anybody else because we can't control anybody else's thoughts. And then if you take it down the line a little bit, we all decide when we go, where we go, how we go, who's with us or not when we go. And my mother used to go to church and light killer candles, is what she called them. If somebody was really suffering and they were the end of their life, her name was Mary Jo. They'd say, "Okay, Mary Jo, go light some killer candles," and inevitably, that person would pass within a few days. And so she kind of got her feathers puffed out, and she thought, "Okay, God answered my prayers." So we still laugh about that all these years later. But nobody decides when anybody else goes or how they go. And you can talk to any hospice worker, you can talk to any ICU or CCU worker, you can talk to any funeral director, and they have unlimited stories about Aunt Susie was dying and everybody was sitting with Aunt Susie. We all took turns and her son was there, and her son left the room for 5 minutes to go get a cup of coffee, and Aunt Susie died while he was out of the room. And you're thinking, Aunt Susie, really? We were on vigil with you for 3 weeks. Aunt Susie wanted to be by herself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all know someone like that. And yeah, it is this spirit aspect of us as well, that we don't know what we've come here to experience. But then also, especially when it comes with cancer, it's this idea of people often go into victim and feeling like they're responsible and it's their fault. So how much influence do we have as well in our lifestyle and our choices to kind of what path we end up taking? Always ultimately spirits.
No, it's complete. And the spirit, that's where free will comes in. My understanding of free will is, okay, here's where we are at point A. We want to get to point B. Spirit doesn't care how you get to point B. Point B may be when you're done living and you decide you want to go to heaven. Doesn't mean you're going to get there by cancer. You might get hit by a bus. I mean, who knows? You may just die of old age and go die in your sleep. But that's where free will comes in. And yes, there's so much documentation about diet and meditation and all kinds of other modalities, energy healing and things like that, that can help people heal. I have many, many clients who were told, okay, there isn't anything else we can do for you. And these are your only options. I even have clients that have gotten screamed at by doctors, and they walked out of the room and they said, have a nice life. I don't want you treating me anyways. And if you're going to act like that. And so 10 years later, they're cancer free, or their cancer is manageable and they're living amazing lives.
Yeah.
So I talked to a woman yesterday who's had cancer. She's got bone cancer for 12 years. And I said, well, how do you feel? She said, great. She said, I don't have any pain. I'm living my life. I go in every once in a while for a scan and whatever. And she made a really good point, Karen. She said, I figure the worst thing that can happen to me is I die and I'm carried to heaven by angels. Okay. And I'm with my deceased loved ones. If that's the worst thing that can happen to me, I'm going to live my life and I'm going to take chances and I'm going to do things that people think are nuts, because at the end of the day, why not?
It's your life. Why not? Again, it's coming out of that fear and just doing what you want to do because it lights you up and makes you feel good, or it's something you want to explore anyway. So I love that as well. And then when your approach to your healing as well, obviously you do allow spirit to work through you, but do you ever take into account where in the body it might present or different aspects like that? And any
Say more. I'm not understanding.
Yeah.
Oh, if there's an
or
emotional
any other
component.
psycho-emotional or psycho-spiritual aspects.
There's always an emotional component to any kind of disease or illness, 100% of the time, 100% of the time. So what I do as part of the healing part of my work, which I believe is the most important part, is I look at what I call the energy field membrane. That's the container that holds the energy that makes up our body and our spirit. Reminds me of really thin, stretchy plastic wrap or saran wrap. When there's a tear or a hole in that energy field membrane, it's allowing an energy leak. Energy leaks always precede any kind of medical condition, and they're caused by an emotional event that in turn causes an energy block. Could be an emotional event from this life or a past life. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if the person remembers. It doesn't matter if it was simple or it was dramatic. The only thing that matters is as soon as we illuminate it, it eradicates it, It allows the energy field membrane to heal, which in turn allows the body to regain full power, regain and maintain health in the meantime. So, an analogy I like to use for this, Karen, is imagine going to the pet store and buying a goldfish. They're going to put it in a plastic bag of water in order for you to get it home. Got a picture of that in your mind's eye. The fish represents our body. The water represents our spirit because the body is inside the spirit. The spirit is the power source for the body, which is why when somebody dies and their spirit and their body separate, the body doesn't work anymore. Doesn't have a power source. So the fish is the body in this analogy. The water is the spirit. The plastic bag's the energy field membrane. If there's a pinhole in that plastic bag and water's draining out a drop at a time, for a long time, that fish is going to be just fine. However, when enough water drains out, that fish is going to be in trouble. And that's what happens to the human body. So I'll see that tear or hole. Most people have one after the age of about 15 or 16. And I'll envision myself going into that tear or hole in my mind's eye. And I'll be given a year and I'll be shown a scene. I had a client this morning who's 70, and I think it was 1967 was the year that I got. And I said, "You're dressed up, you're at a dance." I said, "You look like you're in high school." She said, I was a sophomore in high school. And I said, "You're at a dance, like a prom or a Sadie Hawkins dance or something like that." And I said, and it was not a good experience. Something really dramatic happened. Then she said, "Yeah, I was a victim of date rape at that dance." And I'm like, "Well, okay, that's an emotional event that causes an energy block." And it's always like that, Karen. It's amazing. I always say, I can't make this stuff up. I mean, I don't know what she was doing in 1967. And the energy block looks like a little kernel of unpopped popcorn to me. Gets stuck in the energy field, other life events, emotional energy piles on top of it, eventually causing enough pressure, causes a blowout in this membrane. And then the body's leaking power for a long time. And when we go for where did that energy block begin, we remove all the other emotional energy that's piled up over a lifetime. And unlike psychotherapy that will say, "Okay, Karen, we're going to talk about your life," and it'll be like peeling an onion a layer at a time. Great. I'm a businesswoman. Cut to the chase. I want to get the onion out by the root, and I want to get all that other energy out in one fell swoop. Now, having said that, there's always application for psychotherapy to help people, but I want to get that out. The other interesting thing is when we bring in an energy block from a past life, it's part of that script again that we talked about a couple of minutes ago. It's some semblance of a script that has been explored through multiple lifetimes. You've brought it back in because your spirit wants to look at it from a new vantage point. Different time, different place, different gender, different situation, same basic script. An analogy I like to use for past lives is think of Hamlet. How many times has Hamlet been performed since Shakespeare wrote it in 1602? Who knows? Certainly same script, different perspective. Where was it performed? In what language? By whom? What was the year? What was happening in the world? What was the interpretation that was only for that date and time of performing that play that has the same script since all these hundreds of years have passed?
Yeah, I love these conversations, even just in general, because it's so powerful. Like what we hold in our field, unconsciously or within that energy field membrane and different parts of us that we just don't know. But again, like a lot of things, when you hear, well, maybe for where I'm at as well, initially I was like, what? But the more you learn and you explore and you experience, you're like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of things, they make a lot of sense. So
now, when we come up with situations like this client of mine had been raped at a dance in high school when she was a sophomore in high school, there's no way somebody else is going to know about that they've never met, that they've never even seen. We were on the phone together.
Yeah.
And so when that kind of information comes in, when we have a communication with a deceased loved one, and I talked to somebody yesterday and her father showed up and showed me he was smoking, going at a big old stogie. He was smoking this big old cigar, and I said to her, "Did your dad smoke cigars when he was alive?" She goes, "Oh God, he chain smoked them." I said, "Well, he's smoking them in heaven." But does that mean he's smoking them in heaven? No, it means that's how he's showing up. So I can use that as information to his daughter to let her know, okay, this is really him, because there's no way I would have known that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we get that information from spirit, it helps us at least get the curiosity button pushed. Okay, there's more to the equation here. Maybe. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think that is the word when, because I was not that person really in any way of life. I thought things were very black and white and that was it. And the more I've opened up, and it's like, curiosity is the greatest gift we can have for ourselves and for our life. Because even like you mentioned earlier, nobody can control our thoughts, or nobody can control us because nobody can control our thoughts. And like, that's so powerful. We have so much power there as well, in how we want to interpret our journey, in what meaning we want to create of it, in what story we want to be telling ourselves constantly about what's happening to us and what we're going through and all these things. Like, there's so much power there as well. And I know, talking about the emotional component as well, and obviously you're working your way, but is there other ways as well that people maybe can help themselves? Is there something they can do for themselves in their daily life as well to help release maybe some emotional components that are within?
Remember, our thoughts create our reality, and thoughts don't have a meaning. We give them a meaning when they come into our head. So if you're going to imagine all this bad stuff that's going to happen, you can just as easily imagine the good stuff that can come out of this. Like, okay, I'm going to heal, and I'm going to be led to the people I need to talk to, and the treatment plans that I need to find in order to heal my body. My body is magnificent. My body has the potential to heal itself in any situation, as it does. Everybody does. And I trust that the people are going to show up, and the situations are going to arise, and they're going to be there, and they're going to be very apparent for me. And to remember too that we create through our thoughts, and our body's going to follow what our brain tells it. For example, if you watch a scary movie on TV, your brain knows it's pretend, but your heart might feel like it's getting ready to jump out of your chest in any given moment. Well, your body's following what your brain's telling you, even though your brain doesn't believe it. And so even if it's not feasible, according to the medical community, just add the word yet, or add the word maybe at the end of that sentence as you hear it in your head. Then that leaves you open to the possibility. The other thing is, be open to how things are going to materialize and show up. Because when we have a set plan of how we're going to get from A to F, well, what if the best way to get from A to F is to go A, Q, X, T, whatever, you'll still get to F, but it's in an easier, more elegant way that's more enjoyable. So be open to allowing things to happen instead of being really, I think, especially when we're in fear, we feel like, okay, we have to do it this way. And this is what this expert is telling me. And this is the only way we can do it. When we stay rigid like that, we're blocking out all kinds of other opportunities that we can have to heal. And they're plentiful.
Yeah.
And just because something works for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. But even that idea of rigid, it's like we just totally outsource all of our power. We forget that we can think. We forget that we do still have power and influence over ourselves. And again, even helping someone maybe to remember that or get that spark going again. Because I love what you said there, even just adding that word yet.
Or maybe.
Or maybe, just because again, it's all like it ties back to what you said earlier of how does it feel in your body? And if what you're currently saying makes you feel horrific, but by adding a yet or maybe makes it feel a bit calmer, well, then that's definitely the way to go and to think. And just one last thing before we wrap up. When you say, our thoughts create and our body's listening, I absolutely agree. That is the truth. But then what about, the piece of, but it's not my fault.
Well, none of it's your fault.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody wishes for themselves to get sick and get cancer or any other kind of ailment or pain. It's not anybody's fault. Nobody's consciously or cognitively creating that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's an opportunity to explore. All right, this is here. What is it that I'm exploring? What is it that is going to come out that's going to be good? You're going to use your imagination, as I mentioned, to envision bad stuff. So you might as well use it to envision good stuff, envision stuff that you want, because our thoughts create our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're feeling badly, we're in fight or flight, and the body's going to respond. And what happens when we get sick? What makes us sick? Chronic inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
When do we get chronic inflammation? When we're in fear. So, yes, fear is going to be there, but my favorite technique is the 2-minute rule, Karen. And the 2-minute rule goes like this. Remember, thoughts don't have any meaning till we give them a meaning. So when we have a thought that feels badly, anger, actual fear, boredom, jealousy, whatever, grief, you ask yourself, is this going to kill me in the next 2 minutes? That's going to help you be able to discern between what's a real fear and what's a fake fear. 99.9% of the thoughts we think that feel badly are based in an irrational fear. So you just got a cancer diagnosis. It's horrific. No two ways about that.
Mm-hmm.
You're in fight or flight. You're going, oh my God, fill in the blanks, ... If you can use the 2-minute rule and say, okay, is this going to kill me in the next 2 minutes? It's a yes or no answer. Answer is no. What that does is it lessens the fear enough that you can get a moment of clarity back. Because when we're in fear, we lose all clarity. Get a moment of clarity back and you can say, okay, let me ponder this some. Let me go research this. Let me sit with this for a couple of days and I'll get back to you. And if you're feeling pressured to start treatment, say, okay, yeah, thanks. I understand. I'll get back to you in a couple of days with my decision. Yeah, because they're not making any guarantees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're not saying, okay, you get all your money back if this doesn't work. Right?
Yeah, no. And I saw that with my own dad, like the minute that comes, just the fear, the instant panic of, no, you need treatment now. Like you need to absolutely start straight away. You cannot even have a second. Whereas again, what I've learned from my own bits of learning and research, it can take between 8 and 15 years for a tumor to show up. So you've already been living with it for that long. So like you say, and if it's not pressing on your brain or something, you have a few days. You can take that time, that pause, like you say, to just ponder, to reflect and go, okay, what am I going to do? Yeah. So I think
and
that's...
there is if you do an internet search on best treatment plans, try different search engines too. And there are websites that will tell you, here's what this center is doing, here's what this center is doing, here's what the rate is. A couple of other points that can be really helpful too, Karen. There are a couple of acronyms. One's called number needed to treat, NNT, for number needed to treat. That's the number of people that need to take a medicine in order for it to help one person. So if a doctor is prescribing a medication, do an internet search. Don't do it on Google. Do it on something like DuckDuckGo or something like that. Because a lot of stuff's censored on the main internet searches.
Yeah.
So put in the name of the medicine, put in NNT, the acronym afterwards, and it's going to give you a number. And the higher the number, the less effective the medicine. A great example of that is Lipitor, the statin, the number needed to treat for Lipitor, which is a multi-billion-dollar revenue generator annually.
Not
The
going to
number
give
needed
that
to
up too
treat
easy.
is 100, which means 100 people need to take that medicine in order for it to help one person, which are atrocious odds.
Yeah.
Furthermore, how it's going to help you is it's going to prolong your life by 4 days. And you want to say, really? I don't know that it's worth all these side effects.
Yeah.
So that's number needed to treat. You can also do number needed to harm, and that's NNH. So you put in a procedure like chemotherapy for this type of breast cancer. and then type in NNH afterwards, and you'll get a lot of information. And then those references in that information, you can look up on PubMed, pubmed.org. And there are just millions of studies that don't necessarily see the light of day because they're not published in big journals, which their biggest advertisers are the drug companies. So it gives you the opportunity to research some of this, and you can see, okay, there are lots of modalities that are working, but nobody's hearing about them because the medical establishment's not making any money off of it. And I was in the hospital supply industry for 30 years. I know it well. That's how I made my living. I think it's fabulous. I also know enough to know there are lots of studies that talk about things that aren't known to the general public. And with a little bit of digging, you can find them.
That's exactly it. And that's, again, our power. You can take it upon yourself to do your research, and they're super helpful, the NNT and the NNH, to look up as well on PubMed. So really, really appreciate you joining today, Julie, and sharing. And please, if there's anything that you feel called left to share, please do. And please also share where people can find out on your work.
AskJulieRyan.com. Everything's there. We record my show, Ask Julie Ryan, every Thursday live. You can download it anywhere you get podcasts. We're on YouTube. We're on all the social media. Everything's at Ask Julie Ryan. Also, anybody who's listening as a gift, you are more than welcome to have a free copy of my book, Angelic Attendants, What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life into the Next. And not that you're going to not make it through this cancer journey, but, let's face it, everybody's going to lose a loved one at some point or another, and all of us are going to go too. So this is a book that's really uplifting. It has amazing stories. It talks about how we're surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones. And so if you'd like a free copy, just go to AskJulieRyan.com, click on the Ask Julie button, and just say, hey, I heard you on Karen's show. I would love a free copy of your book, and we'll send you a digital and an audio book download for free. Feel free to share that with your loved ones as well, if you choose.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Julie. And I will share those links as well on the show notes on my website, and the details as well for your weekly show, which again is just fantastic. I would encourage anyone to be curious and to call in if they wish. And thanking you so, so much again for all you're doing and for sharing on your work.
My honor. Always a treat to be with you, girl.
Thanks for listening. And before you go, I would love to ask you a massive favor. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode of the podcast, I would love for you to leave a short review on Apple Podcasts to help it grow. If you could do that, I would greatly appreciate it.